Hello everyone! This episode will be about last week's high-profile vulnerabilities in Spring. Let's figure out what happened. Of course, it's amazing how fragmented the software development world has become. Now there are so many technologies, programming languages, libraries, and frameworks. It becomes very difficult to keep them all inside, especially if it is not the stack you use every day. Entropy keeps growing every year. Programmers are relying more and more on off-the-shelf libraries and frameworks, even where it may not be fully justified. And vulnerabilities in these off-the-shelf components lead to huge problems. So it was in the case of a very critical Log4Shell vulnerability, so it may be in the case of Spring vulnerabilities. Spring is a set of products that are used for Java development. They are developed and maintained by VMware. The main one is Spring Framework, but there are lots of them, at least 21 on the website. And because Spring belongs to VMware, you can find a description of the vulnerabilities on the VMware Tanzu website. VMware Tanzu is a suite of products that helps users run and manage multiple Kubernetes clusters across public and private clouds. Spring is apparently also part of this suite, and therefore Spring vulnerabilities are published there. Let's take a look at the 3 most serious vulnerabilities published in the last month. CVE 2022-22-965, Spring4Shell, Spring Framework Remote Code Execution, RCE via data bindings on JDK 9+. Spring Core Framework is widely used in Java applications. It allows software developers to develop Java applications with enterprise-level components effortlessly. Spring4Shell vulnerability allows remote attackers to plant a web shell when running Spring Framework apps on top of JRE9. It is caused by unsafe deserialization of given arguments that a simple HTTP POST request can trigger and allow full remote access. In fact, it is a patch bypass of the old CVE 2010-1622 vulnerability that was introduced 12 years ago. The exploitation of this vulnerability relies on an endpoint with data binder enabled, which decodes data from the request body automatically. The specific exploit requires the application to run on Tomcat as a var deployment. If the application is deployed as a Spring Boot executable jar, that is the default, it is not vulnerable to the exploit. However, the nature of the vulnerability is more general and there may be other ways to exploit it. There are the prerequisites for the exploit: JDK 9 or higher, a patched Tomcat as the servlet container, packaged as var, Spring Web MVC or Spring Web Flux dependency, Spring Framework 5.3.0 to 5.3.17, 5.2.0 to 5.2.19. Older unsupported versions are also affected. There are signs of exploitation in the wild for this vulnerability. There are more than 30 repositories with proof of concept and examples of vulnerable applications on GitHub. In short, look for Spring Framework applications on your Tomcats and then update them to version 5.3.18 and 5.2.20. Qualys recommendations for Linux: find Java 9+ with locate, find Spring Web MVC *jar, Spring Web Flux *jar or Spring Boot *jar in ls-l proc *fd. As an option, you can try to update the Tomcats first. It is easier. While CVE 2022-22-965 resides in the Spring Framework, the Apache Tomcat team released new versions of Tomcat to close the attack vector on Tomcat's side. The remaining two vulnerabilities are in rare components that are not part of the Spring core framework. CVE 2022-22-963 Remote code execution in Spring Cloud function by malicious Spring expression. Spring Cloud function is a serverless framework for implementing business logic via functions. In Spring Cloud Functions version 3.1.6, 3.2.2 and older unsupported versions, when using routing functionality, it is possible for a user to provide a specifically crafted SPEL as a routing expression that may result in remote code execution and access to local resources. Users of affected versions should upgrade to 3.1.7, 3.2.3. No other steps are necessary. There are also POCs for this vulnerability. And finally, I would like to finish with a vulnerability that came out a month ago and went quite unnoticed. CVE 2022-22-947 Spring Cloud Gateway Code Injection Vulnerability. Spring Cloud Gateway aims to provide a simple yet effective way to route to APIs and provide cross-cutting concerns to them, such as security, monitoring, metrics, and resiliency. Applications using Spring Cloud gateways are vulnerable to a code injection attack when the gateway actuator endpoint is enabled, exposed, and unsecured. A remote attacker could make a maliciously crafted request that could allow arbitrary remote execution on the remote host. Users of affected versions should apply the following recommendation. 3.1x users should upgrade to 3.1.1+. 3.0x users should upgrade to 3.0.7+. If the gateway actuator endpoint is not needed, it should be disabled via management endpoint gateway enabled false. There are also POCs for this vulnerability, not only in GitHub, but also in public exploit packs. And that's it for today. Please subscribe and leave your comments. Bye.